Hey everybody, welcome to Earth and Time, a channel where we explore Earth as well as human history. And today I'm in a beautiful landscape. I'm out by Capitol Reef National Park. I'm just west of that at Torrey, Utah, where today I'm gonna go check out some areas where I heard you can collect some petrified wood here. So come join me today. Let's see if we can find some petrified wood together coming out of these ancient cliffs. Let's get to it. I stopped at this pool out so I can give you a pan around of how spectacular the geology and the scenery is here, and talk a little bit about the stratigraphy, or the layers of the earth that we see in front of us here. And this is part of what's known as the Moenkopi Formation. So this is Triassic. All the rocks we're really looking at here that are red in the buff color, all from the time of the dinosaurs. And of course, the time of the dinosaurs is broken into three different sections. It's the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. And after the Cretaceous is when dinosaurs went extinct. So this is during the Triassic, so the earlier time of the dinosaurs. And we actually see a lot of Triassic and Jurassic rocks all in front of us. And we'll talk some more about the geologic sequences in here. You also have things like the Wingate and Kanta. But I wanted to give you an idea about what we're looking at, the time period we're looking at. So when we start looking for the petrified wood, which I believe is coming out of what's known as the Chinle Formation that sits on top of the Moenkopi back here in what's actually known as a petrified forest member, we'll be able to get an idea about where we're at in geologic time. All right, up the dirt road we go. As we're starting to approach the cliffs up here, we can see a nice exposure of the Moenkopi right there. But I wanted to show all the black boulders that are here on the ground that are fairly rounded, and they're pretty good size that are out here. I mean, they're bigger than I can pick up most of them, and they're rounded, which means they've traveled some distance. These are all basalt boulders from basalt flows that are on top of the mountain range off in the distance, where you can see the flat top up there. So these are part of the Boulder Mountain lava flows, which are roughly around 20 million years old. When rocks first fall off of a cliff face, they're pretty angular. So in order for them to get rounded, like we see here, it means they've had to travel some distance, probably a pretty good distance. And not just that, but they've had to be influenced by gravity and water. So I wanted to share that observation with you all. It means there are some pretty big flooding events and water events coming out of these canyons in order to create this landscape that we see here, which is basically a large alluvial fan. I've worked my way up and through the alluvial fans from the base of the cliffs there. And what I want to show you is the bottom section, what's known as a Chinle, and that's a sandstone outcrop in front of us. So these were large rivers that were cutting through this landscape in the later part of the Triassic. And this is a remnant of one of those large rivers, and it's called the Shinarump Formation. And we can see these large sandstone formations from here all the way down towards St. George, Utah, or the border with Nevada and Arizona. But it tells me that we were moving into more of a continental environment that these dinosaurs were living in. So dinosaurs would have been walking along rivers like we can see preserved here in this cliff face. And sitting on top of the Shinarump is actually the petrified forest member of the Chinle. So I'm excited to go take a look at that and see if that's where this petrified wood's coming from. My guess is probably yes. Welcome to the petrified forest member of the Chinle. That's all that very colorful rock and dirt we can see in front of us, or soil. So zooming in, we can really see the stratigraphy here, where we can see the Chinle Formation in front of me to the base of that hill, including that small cliff face, grading up into what we call the Wingate Sandstone. And that's that bold red cliff that's up above. And so the Wingate's what makes up a large portion of Capitol Reef National Park as well. And we can pan around and see the Wingate somewhere towards about halfway up this section of the Wingate, where you can start seeing what look like little steps back. That's probably the Kayenta Formation, Navajo Formation, which we can see off in the distance, where you go from the red to the white, which is a whole interesting story in itself. What happened to all the iron oxide, which is what creates the red rocks in this area, why they're bleached white. And we can talk about that maybe later on in this video. But for now, we're in this region where we should start looking for this petrified wood and see if we can find any. So I'm going to start moseying around and see what happens. As I walk through this lower portion of the petrified forest member, I'm actually not seeing a lot of petrified wood or evidence of petrified wood, but we'll keep walking around. So these streams are a great place to figure out what you can find in the slopes around you. So in this lower portion of the Chinle Formation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at all these rocks I've gotten grouped up here along this river stream and see if I see evidence of petrified wood. I'm not seeing too much, but let me continue up this wash a little ways and see if I can find any pieces. If not, I think our answer where we're going to find most of the wood based on what I'm seeing is closer to the base of that mountain. I walked up the stream a little bit farther and look, I did find a piece of petrified wood. And I don't know if this is coming from the upper section, the lower section, but it was here in the riverbed, in this little stream bed. Pretty exciting to see. Found my first piece of petrified wood out here. Worked my way over to this hill where I can see a bunch of debris coming down and trying to figure out, is this where some of the petrified wood is coming from? And I do believe I just found another piece of petrified wood. And I did find this spectacular piece. Look at this. So this is a piece of petrified wood. It's become agate. The material in the wood actually gets replaced through a process called permineralization, which is where the carbon's replaced by silica, and it becomes different colors because the silica carries different kinds of materials with it. In this case, it looks like it's probably iron mostly, which gives it that red and orange color. You may see some black in there, which could be some carbon, but you can get all kinds of different colors in the wood depending on what's being carried with the silica. But pretty cool and nice piece to find here. A very small piece, but I would love to find a larger version of this here in the Chinle. And now I found another piece, and this is all black. So tell me there's a lot of carbon carried into this, or maybe even manganese can make it black as well, with the silica creating that color of petrified wood. And here's another little piece. Definitely some petrified wood sprinkled in to these slopes that I'm walking along here, suggesting, of course, that there was a pretty robust forest system growing in this part of the country back during the Triassic, during the early time of the dinosaurs. Now, I guess the question is, I mentioned dinosaurs. Can you find dinosaur bones in this? And I'll have to defer to my paleontological friends, but I know the Chinle has produced a number of dinosaur species. I believe Coelophysis is probably the most prominent that was found over on Ghost Ranch, which is in the Chinle. I don't know what they found in this area as far as dinosaurs go. Obviously, there's petrified wood here. You have the potential to preserve parts of a dinosaur as well. So what kind of environment was this? Well, if there's petrified wood here, we know there was a forest at one time, but we also see these little thin sandstone units coming through, representing some streams or rivers that would have been cutting through this forest that were preserved as well. And we can actually see one of those right in front of me here. In front of me is a really interesting feature. If you can see kind of the hummocky nature, or you can see the soil where it's red and it's got that gray black and it's kind of bumpy, that's known as cryptobiotic soil. And if you ever see it, please do not step on it. It takes a long time to form, but these are actually the remnants of living organisms, or are living organisms that take a long time to grow here in the desert. And you'll see these cryptobiotic soils all over the place out here, but please, if you come out, do not step on them. Found a couple more pieces of petrified wood. This one's really interesting. You can kind of see the ring pattern on it just ever so slightly coming through there. But I always like turning them on their side and seeing too, and you can see the texture of the petrified wood. So these are some nice pieces. I mean, these are ones that are, they're not museum quality, but they are fun for a collection. Here's another one a little bit different. Maybe we have a little bit of bark on the side, and then we can see some of the lines where we're cutting across the rings that were preserved. If you do come out here and collect, make sure you checked with the Forest Service and the BLM website about how much you can collect. It used to be 25 pounds plus one specimen, which I always thought was interesting. I don't know what the rules are now and how they've changed, so I'm really doing a catch and release program right now where I'm showing you all this and then putting it back. But if you come out here, make sure you check those rules and guidelines before you come out here and collect. This is pretty cool. This is the top of one of those sandstone units or river deposits, and sometimes these are a little bit siltier, and what's fascinating about them is once in a while you can find a dinosaur track in deposits like this on the top where you see a dinosaur stepped in, but I don't see anything like that today. But I can see what we call ripple marks, and that's these little patterns in here that tell me that water flowed through here, and they're actually related to river or stream deposits. And eventually those disappear as I head up the hill a little farther. And take a look at that beautiful piece of petrified wood. Wow, that's gorgeous. Look at the purples and whites in that. That's a nice piece. Pretty cool to be picking up pieces of trees and plants that were from 200 million years ago. And you know, dinosaurs were probably walking along and roaming through this area. I mean, how awesome is that? And there's tons of pieces right in this area. Oh, here's some with some beautiful colors. You can see the reds and oranges on this one. That's a spectacular piece. That is definitely a keeper if somebody comes out here and finds out if they can collect it or not. And there's just beautiful small piece after beautiful small piece. A great place to bring kids to come collect, and not too far. I think I've only walked about 5 minutes from the car, 8 minutes from the car. A little further up the hill here and found even more petrified wood. Give you an idea about what the topography looks like here. It's easy walking. The drive was fairly easy. You did have a couple little streams to get across, so you want to make sure you have a high clearance vehicle, but definitely worth coming to explore this area. And you can see the beautiful view I get to enjoy along the way. Well, when I first got here, I was a little worried, so I found that one piece in the stream, and I found some other small pieces, but that was a nice little treasure trove of petrified wood I just found. Now I would love to find a larger piece. I think in the environment where it's being deposited here, where these are probably being carried down these small streams and being deposited adjacent to them, probably not going to find a large log or a large trunk, if you will, or branch, but even finding these small pieces is really exciting. It's just awe-inspiring to me to be walking in the footsteps of dinosaurs and of the ancient world as I'm walking across this topography. My way to the base of that hill, and again, finding little pieces of petrified wood scattered all around the ground here. Now, my friends, this is really, really cool. You can see the sandstone coming out of the mudstones here, and actually it continues kind of over off on the right-hand side. What's interesting about this, you can kind of see how there's cross beds, but what's more interesting about this, and I don't know if I've seen this in rocks this old before, is there's actually a little bit of a travertine deposit here where you can see what would have been hot water came through this rock at some point. So this would have been something that would have fed something like a hot spring in here. And I don't think I've ever seen this in these kinds of rocks, but that's pretty spectacular. You have these little travertine deposits coming through. It kind of gives me the appearance of like a septarian nodule almost. If you're familiar with those, also found here in Utah, but south of us. Pretty cool thing to see and something I haven't experienced before, and I'm glad I can share it with you. So what is this telling me? It's telling me some hot water had to flow through these rocks during some time. Now, that could have been shortly after the deposition of this river deposit or these sandstones, or it could have been something much, much later, millions or hundreds of millions of years later. And actually, I'm not sure which one. So if you go somewhere like Yellowstone or Mammoth area where you have these hot springs, you'll see these travertine deposits depositing because of the hot springs modern day. Pretty cool to see an ancient version of maybe what would have been one of the feeder systems or pipes for a system that could have been here who knows how long ago. Wow, look at that beauty. As I'm moving closer to the cliff face, I'm finding nicer and nicer specimens of petrified wood. In fact, look at these two really nice pieces. You can still see the bark on them. They have beautiful color. All right, I'm definitely getting into an area with lots and lots and lots of petrified wood. Piece. I mean, there's pieces everywhere here. So you can work your way through and find, these are all pieces of petrified wood. You can find some nice specimens for your collections if you come here. I mean, they're just beautiful. This one's like a little branch. Look at the bark. As I'm hiking up to the hills here, I wanted to share this. This is something you don't see very often, and that is, this is one large log in the petrified forest member that is eroding. Now, I don't know if it's standing up on end, which it kind of looks like, or if it's kind of a weird angle laying down, but I wanted to share this with y'all because it's not very often you see what's left of a log here. And this thing is probably 6 feet across, at least this way, and even more that way, maybe 8 feet across. And I can actually see a couple other little piles floating around, which I think are all these ancient stumps or logs that are preserved and slowly wearing away. And you can see people have been digging this one up, probably chasing after these beautiful colors. All right, wanted to show one more chunk of petrified wood up here. I'm sitting on top of the hill, absolutely spectacular view. You can see where my car is out there, but we can see just how amazing the landscape and the topography is here. I wanted to take a quick minute and talk about the color change we see in the Navajo across the way. We have the Wingate over here. They're dipping down below. In fact, you can see the Wingate continue over there, and then you're going to go up into the Kanta and get into the Navajo, where you can actually see that distinct line between the red and white. So when these rocks were all deposited, they're deposited in a oxidizing environment, an iron-rich oxidizing environment, and that's what gives us all the red rocks here. What's fascinating is why they actually turn white. And the reason they turn white is because there's been what's called a reducing fluid flow through them. And a reducing fluid can be a number of different things. They used to look for reducing fluids flowing through rocks to find things like uranium, but also reducing fluid are actually hydrocarbons or oil. The bleached Navajo rock, you'll notice there's a nice line right at the bottom. A lot of times those are developed at what we call oil-water contacts. We know oil floats on water, and there's a possibility that this was an ancient oil field or hydrocarbon field when there were miles and miles of material above us. Now, how do we know there were miles and miles of material above us? You can turn around 180 and look at what's known as the Henry Mountains, which you can see cropping out way out there in the distance. Now, those are what are known as a laccolith. So these were deposited deep inside the earth with miles of sediment on top of them. But today they sit at the surface. Not only do they sit at the surface, they are thousands and thousands of feet above our current elevation. So we removed miles and miles of material off the Colorado Plateau as it was being uplifted post the Laramide orogeny. And so what we have exposed in front of us here is an ancient oil field that once sat miles below the ground, but has now come to the surface through erosion and uplift. Pretty cool story and work that was actually done by a geologist out of University of Utah named Marjorie Chan. Her work is phenomenal and definitely worth looking into if you want to learn more about these ancient exposed oil and gas deposits that we can see today. Made it almost to the base of the cliff, and one thing I did notice is I'm not seeing as much petrified wood as I get this far up. It doesn't mean that there can't be some in the slopes up here, but this is as far as I'm going to go today, and I wanted to show you this cliff face, still showing the Chinle Formation. In fact, this ridge that's right in front of us is one of these ancient riverbeds. In fact, you can see where they have cross bedding from the flow of the rivers in one of those hill cuts. Really, really fascinating to see, and tells me that you kind of had a muddy lake environment, and then you had these rivers coming through at different times. And we can see that throughout the geologic record where this happens again and again. In fact, we can see this happening today in a number of places, like in Texas or off the southeastern coast. From up at this amazing view in this amazing, beautiful place, I want to say thank you all for joining me today. I really enjoyed going to explore for petrified wood with you. I didn't know if I was going to find any, so I'm excited it worked out, because this video could have been pretty boring if not. As a reminder, if you ever do come out this way, please make sure you check with the BLM and the U.S. Forest Service guidelines for if you can collect or not, and then how much you're allowed to collect. With all that being said, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Keep up on all my adventures looking at Earth history and human history, and specifically where the two connect. I will see you all in the next adventure. Take care. Bye for now.